All right, well, it is 12 o'clock and I will officially call the Akron Rotary meeting to order. And today our invocator is Cindy Kane. Cindy.
Thank you and good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, and welcome to our guests. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with grateful hearts. We thank you for our relationships with you, our families, our neighbors, and our fellow Rotarians. We thank you for giving us talents, gifts, and work that we enjoy. As Rotarians, we thank you for the reminder of living the four-way test in all we think, say, and do. We ask that you give us wisdom, knowledge, understanding, prudence, and discretion in all of our dealings. Today we welcome Seema and we look forward to hearing more about the happenings at the Art Museum, one of our area gems. Bless our city and our leaders. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I had a little difficulty unmuting. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Cheryl, can you show us the slide? The four-way test of the things we say, think, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Well, welcome everybody again. And Karen Herdlicka is our greeter. Would you like to highlight any guests?
I'm looking through before our invocation. There were not any guests. And I still do not see any except for Seema, our speaker. So.
All right. Well, we will get to introduce Seema in a few minutes. Right now, I want to know if there are any Rotary ambassadors present. Anybody that attended a Rotary event or another club meeting. And Cheryl's been on the road.
I did. Friday and Saturday, we had coordinator training. So we have a zone. It's zone 30, 31, and our district is part of zone 30. So they train all of our various coordinators, and usually they send them all to Evanston, but they did it on Friday night and Saturday morning this year virtually. And it was very enlightening. So we got to, the coordinators include people from public image. They basically help our district public image and club public image folks, foundation. So every aspect of Rotary was represented by Zone 30 and 31 during the training.
Well, that's exciting.
There
Jack
was
Harry?
one of us at the Stowe meeting to hear Dr. Rob's update, and there was some fresh material there that I really appreciated, and hope that at some point that some of it can be updated for our club members. But job well done, and it was wonderful to see friends that I've enjoyed their breakfast meetings over the years, and it was just good to see the friends.
Well, thank you, Jack. And I do appreciate Cheryl, Stu, and Jack were all present to have my back as I was speaking to the Stowe Monroe Falls Rotary Club. And it's been great. Jack's actually followed me in a couple of talks to other clubs and given me nice feedback. So I can find out some of those catchphrases that Cindy Kane used to call me out in Toastmasters, so that Jack did the same thing. And I do not say young bucks when I'm talking about a crowd of younger Rotarians. He taught me to take that out of my vocabulary, and I'm grateful for that, Jack. Thank you.
Thanks
Anybody
for
else?
your help, Jack.
She's been working on me forever, Jack. Anybody else was an ambassador this week? I'm not seeing any hands. Karen, you can help me out on that. If you see anybody, let me know. Announcements. You should have gotten an invitation to the District Leadership Assembly May 15th from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. The President-elect, Steve Bowie, you're mandatory, but all other board members and anyone interested in leadership in Rotary should attend. I think that it was a great session when we had it in person. And I think the virtual district conference we had recently showed us we can do anything in a creative manner despite the social distancing. So I think that would be a great thing to put on your calendars. Again, it's May 15th, 9 a.m. to 12. Are there any other announcements? All right, well then it's time for me to ask who's happy. Tom Knauer's happy.
Thank you, Rob. I want to offer $100 as a thank you to the club and many individual members who've expressed their friendship and support following the passing of my father. So thanks one and all. I appreciate it. My family is very grateful. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tom. And thanks for being here. Who else is happy?
I'm happy.
Why are you happy,
Well,
Professor? Why are you happy, Professor?
Professor Kiefer, last week, April 28th, my third grandchild was born. Arlo, not Arlo Guthrie, although I would like that. Arlo Bruce Corrigan. Is my great grandchild. Yeah. So
That's awesome.
we're happy. $20 on the way to you guys. So
Well, thank you, Jerry and Jenny.
you're welcome.
Susan?
David
Susan?
Huff. Okay.
Yes, I'm happy. So I will contribute $5 for Riley Jones's graduation magna cum laude from the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. And this summer, he will be in his fourth season with the Alaska firefighters. So when you hear about forest fires in Alaska, you can, think of him and say a little prayer. And in August, depending on the weather, he may be down in the lower 48 because they often send people down there. But he's an awesome kid and he's got a lot of great experience and will go on for a bright future.
Thank you.
David
And
Hall
you-
was happy.
David Hall, happy David.
Yeah, so I have a happy dollar. I don't have any grandchildren, but I did pick up a grand puppy over the weekend. My son, who lives in Chicago, adopted a puppy from one of my daughter's friends in Florida's family that's in North Carolina. The poor puppy made his way from North Carolina on Saturday morning to Louisville, Kentucky, to Columbus, Ohio, to Akron, Ohio, and to Chicago last night. So just happy. Cutest little chocolate lab. So very happy.
What's his name?
We thought it was going to be a Reuben, but he came up with Ernie. So he said if he gets a second one, he can have the second one as Bert.
Thanks, David. Laura Smiley.
Hi, so I'm happy today. There's some great things going on in Akron. Tonight is the home opener at the Akron Rubber Ducks Stadium. So I was there on Saturday and it felt really pretty normal. They were getting the field ready. Everything was lit up. The stadium looked beautiful. So just a plug for those guys, if you have the chance to get out and see one of the 60 home games that they have this season, it's a great way to spend the afternoon, and it's a cheap date too to go downtown and see the game. And then the other $5 is I'm just really excited to see Seema on this call. She is exceptional. I'm excited that if you haven't met her, that you all get to meet her this afternoon. The Akron Art Museum has been a great partner to the radio station for years. And I'm super thrilled to see their event calendar starting to fill up too for things that are going on this summer. So I'm excited to hear what Seema has to share with us this afternoon.
All right, thank you, Jack.
And we
is
love
your
her
hand up?
back. I have to say, we love her back.
We'll have put in $5 happy to encourage people to go vote for the library levy.
Good idea, Jack. And Doug House Connect, Dr. Doug already voted. He just showed off his little sticker.
And I'll be happy too. This weekend, my wife and I and a few other Rotarians are down to camp to help with the early cleanup. And on Friday, a couple of students from the university came out as individuals to help clean up and continue the memorial service project that the university has been running for about 5 years now with a service project at camp.
Oh, that's nice. Anybody else happy?
Dr. Rob, I got another happy dollar because I just love watching Vivian float on the water at Portage Lakes there and Jack kind of dip in and out of the lake. That's just making me crack up and making me smile.
Well, we have to celebrate those technological wonders or mishaps. It's a fun way to look at it and put a positive spin on it, David Hall, which you're always excellent at doing. Well, I'm going to give 15 happy dollars because I just want to thank the support that I've gotten from Cheryl and Jack and Stu and all of you, but for following me along as I continually give a message about Akron Children's, as well as this one was entitled The Silver Lining of COVID. So that's one that if we get in a jam, Katie Miller, I can dust that one off pretty quickly, because there really have been things that are going to be forever changing the delivery of medicine. And I think for a much more patient, parent-centered view, and it's a shame we needed a pandemic to get there, but I'll be happy to share some of those things. But thanks for your support. And also I want to celebrate the fact that I'm happy because as of tomorrow morning, I will be off the grid for 7 days. I don't think I've been off the grid over the past year completely. I've been away, but I've been kind of locked to my computer, and my youngest daughter, whose wedding got canceled last May, is actually going to have an abbreviated version of her wedding this Saturday. Vermont is very strict. In order to go to this resort, you have to either have a proof of full vaccination or a COVID test within 72 hours. So I think this will be the closest to a normal thing that I will have done in, well, all of us have done in over a year. So I'm very much looking forward to it. All right. We don't have any inductions, so we will get right to the main course here. Seema is someone that many of us have interacted with, and she is certainly a force to be reckoned with, as she is the Chief Experience Officer at Akron Art Museum. So I guess you're the CEO of the Art Museum. I don't know if your CEO knows that your letters do the same have the same gravitas.
It does, sort of. You're right. Yeah, I like that X though. It's pretty rare to have an X in your title. So
there you
CXO is usually what they say.
CXO, all right. Well, CEO will probably get you a pay grade, but anyhow, without further ado, Seema, please, we want to hear what's exciting and new at the Akron Art Museum, and just share some of your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I'm so excited to meet you all. And as was said, it's true. My family, both of my grandfathers were Rotarians, and my uncle just rolled off. He was Governor General for 3118, I think, 3181. Sorry, it's in Mangalore, India, and he was at the big convocation or whatever in San Diego in February of 2020. He left the States on February 29th of 2020. So, and my cousin, I have more than one cousin who are Rotarian. So I'm very excited to be here virtually. Hopefully I will get to see all of you in real life. The museum is open now. our hours, that's hard to say, right now are Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We have late nights on the second Friday of every month. And I can't remember exactly what our tagline is. It's something like date night, friend night, alone night, but basically anything you want to do on a Friday night. And we, as Laura said, Laura's a really loyal partner of ours. And she knows that we're bringing on all sorts of programming, including music programming. Our Downtown at Dusk, which had to go virtual last year, is returning to the garden the Thursdays in July. So there's lots of programming we will have on the second Friday of every month. We will have it's a socially distanced escape room style game that you could sign up for free. And we're gonna have some pop-up music concerts. We will start having artist talks again. Our first artist talk will be in June. So lots of things are happening. And I could talk about programming, probably chapter and verse for a really long time, but I wanted to share some of the art happenings there. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Despite a year of Zoom, I always wonder if it's going to work. So let's see if it does. Hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint. Yay, good. So we have a number of exhibitions. We opened on February 18th with this exhibition. And I have my dates because if I tell you from my head when the show closes, I will get it wrong. This show is open until September 19th, so you have plenty of time to see it. It's a two-part show. It's called Totally Rad and Totally Radical. And one of the things that many museums are doing during closure and then reopening is finding ways that our members and participants can see what was in storage. And so this is a show that grew out of our own collection. We were standing in storage one day I think it was in the fall, and we said, oh my gosh, we have a lot of art from the 80s. And it was, must have been before the election, because we said, I do actually remember the 80s. My colleague did not. He was born right at the end. And he said, I'm thinking about the 80s and it really resonates with a lot of things that are happening in America now. It would be interesting to do a show. And so that's where the show came from. And I'm going to showcase some of my favorites, but not everything that's in the show. So you can come and see it. This work is one of my favorites. It's by an artist named Nancy Graves. A thing that's happening in art today is that we're relooking at a lot of the artists who weren't as famous as some of the other names, and Nancy Graves is one of those people who you'll probably see in the news more and more. They're working on an exhibition of her work. She was a female artist who, part of the reason she didn't have probably as much renown as other artists who were working at her time was because she tried lots of different techniques. And so I'm gonna show you two Nancy Graves, I think, in this PowerPoint, but this is one of them. And it's a print. And it actually does come from something real. Does this look like anything to anyone? I'm just curious.
Looks a little like a map.
Exactly, it is. She was looking at the maps of the ocean floor. And so she started with that. Now, I am excited that you said that, because now I've given this talk to a couple of groups and everyone says no. And I think that's important, because actually one of the things Nancy Graves did was she took things that were maybe recognizable and she turned them into something else. And I love that this is called vertigo. And perhaps the maps were giving her vertigo, but I think it also shows that there's a lot of movement. And the way that this is made is very interesting. We commissioned a lot of regional artists to make process videos. So you can go to our Instagram page, and there's an artist named Joe Shergill who prints in Cleveland at Zygote, and he showed us how to do this process. And you'll have to go. I never put videos into my PowerPoint because I always feel like they won't work. But you can go to our Instagram afterwards and see the video. But what basically happens is she has a different screen for every color you see in this image. And so she prints each color separately. So she first does the blue or the yellow, I don't know which order she did it in, and then picks up the screen, puts another screen down, and the paper has to stay in place. You basically, it's called keying it. And so this was a very labor-intensive process, and it's a process, this was done in an edition. That means that there's more than one of this, and each of them has to look exactly the same. So that means, like, for example, and I can tell you as somebody who once did a lot of silk screening in my old job, it's often hard. You're pushing ink through literally a silk screen. And if your pressure is different in the next pull and the red isn't even, so you've already done 3 colors, you're doing the next one, it's not even, that print is ruined. And you can see her signature. I don't know if my mouse will show up on your screen, but you can see her signature right here.
Yeah, we can see your mouse. Mhm.
Cool. Now let's see, is this gonna go forward for me? No, this always does this to me somehow live. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna share my screen again. Give me 1 second. It just stopped. It always does this to me when I do presentations. There we go. Share screen. So we're just gonna see this PowerPoint actually. I'm gonna do it this way. So I'm sorry that you have to see my back end thing, but for some reason it always freezes on me when I'm doing it the other way. So one of the other major themes that we really wanted to deal with in this show is the way that the world was in the 80s. And so we have a number of works, and that's the part we call totally radical, actually, that just gives you a sort of a snapshot of some of the social forces that were happening. This is a work by the Guerrilla Girls, and I encourage you to come to the free talk. It's going to be a virtual free talk. I think it's the last Tuesday in August, but it'll be up on our website, so you can register through our website. And the Guerrilla Girls are a collective of artists who have been working since the 80s to encourage people to see how the world has inequity. And what they do is, and they're very famous artists, we don't know who they are. Quite literally, you don't know. I met them. I went to a workshop they did when I was in graduate school, and they quite literally wore these masks. And the reason they do it is because they want to share things that they think have iniquity. And so, for example, this is probably the most famous work they did. They did it in the 80s. You can see it's from 85 to 89. And they put it up all around New York. And they what they saw was, and it's slowly changing, but not as quickly as you would think, that in the Met, much of the work is made by men. If it's been identified, if the artist has been identified. And so this is one of the works. We have 3 works that are there, and their talk will be wonderful because it'll give you a sense of how artists are still dealing with this. And it's interesting because the people who are, what they do is they take the name of a female artist. And so the people who are speaking virtually for us are Frida Kahlo and Augusta Savage. Augusta Savage is an African-American sculptor who's deceased from the 20th century. So what's interesting about this is art and activism, and in some ways it's also a sign because they put these signs outside of the mat on like garbage cans and stuff. Another work that I want to show, and this is actually one of my favorites in the show, is by Robert Rauschenberg. And Robert Rauschenberg was one of the first artists to go to, American artists to go to the Soviet Union. And so he goes to the Soviet Union, and it's during the Cold War. And we've talked a lot about this because I think for people who didn't live through the Cold War, it's hard to understand that it was a war. They don't, like I was saying, as a kid, I remember seeing on 60 Minutes, things about the Cold War. But for people who are younger, this work is hard for them to access. I think that many of us might see it and see that there's things that look like they have, that they're images of Russia, or there's senses of that. But this work is actually about how he was, looking, and we have a number of Rauschenberg works. Rauschenberg is really interested in this idea that sometimes these things happen, but then sometimes there's positive forces to these. And so this has these bright colors because it's in some ways an antidote to the Cold War. And so you can see it's called Soviet American Array. And we have 4 of them up in the show. And these are huge. I mean, they take a whole, they're very tall. You can see the dimensions right here, 88 inches. Some of the other works in the show, what I love about the art is that you can take it as you will. And so this is by Robert Glenn Ketchum. You should see this is from the Cuyahoga Valley National Park series. But it actually has a very important political underpinning. And so Robert Glenn Ketchum was very interested in the 80s. You see this this kind of I would say tit and tat of sort of push pull between people who wanted federal lands to be kept for preservation and those who wanted federal lands to be used for mining, for gas and for forestry. And so he was on the preservation side of this. And so he really saw his work as sort of showing this in the same way that American artists have been doing this since artists like Bierstadt was going to Yosemite. And of course, in the 80s, our national park was not yet a national park. So you can see that that was incredibly important stuff he was doing. So a few more things, and then I really do need, I can tell, this always happens to me. I want to talk about art and then I just get too, I have a lot to go through. So I'm going to kind of just skip through a little bit of this. This is a wonderful print it's actually also quite enormous. It's 57 inches. And this is called a puzzle print. And a puzzle print is a wonderful process where if you look at this and you look at all of the different colors, they're actually a different block. And what they do is, and this is sort of the opposite of how Nancy Graves did it. So they do this so that you don't mess up a print. And so each piece is actually almost like Legos. They're each inked separately, cut separately, and then put together on a board and then printed. And so it's an innovation. Judy Pfaff actually saw puzzle prints are used in the States, but she had seen printmaking in Japan. And so that was what sort of inspired her to do this. And this is an enormous print. I'm gonna skip Larry Socks so I can get to another, I'm sorry to say, oh, here we go. Okay, to go to what's the other thing that's exciting that's happening at the museum. What we're doing is we are inviting people into storage in a way. Now storage, I know lots of people would like to see what storage is. Of course, museums have all sorts of rules, and so people can't go into storage. Even actually many of our staff cannot go into storage. And the reason that we do that is to protect our collections and actually to protect our staff. There's a lot of rules about art handling. I, for example, do not handle artwork. I have an art handler, so I don't touch it. It's as if you were in a job and you want to decrease liability, basically. So we wanted to, and I'm sorry to say my dog always likes to make an appearance. So here's my lab, who's just appeared here. But we wanted to bring people into some of the things that haven't been on view for a very, very long time. And so we have many works of art. I wanted to showcase a few of them. I'm going to flip through a couple of them, but I wanted to show you first this one. You'll see it right now, and we're actually so excited to show you storage. We're going to have 2 rotations this summer. So these are up right now, and they will be up until June 6th. And then the next installation will go up soon after. So here's the first one I wanted to share with you. That's the wall that it'll be on, so you can see some of the works that it was with. And this is a work by a person named Mary Ellen McDermott. I'm trying to pull it open for you. And Mary Ellen McDermott was, and this is actually everybody's favorite. I strongly encourage you to join TikTok and look at our TikTok account because we have some close-ups on this work of art there, videos. Mary Ellen McDermott taught at the Akron Art Institute, and she taught painting and enamel. And I know it's a little bit hard to see in this, and we're actually, one of the reasons we're doing this show is that we're creating better digital photography. So soon I will have a wonderful picture of this on my website, but not quite yet. It's very hard to see, but you're going to come to the museum and see this in real life, because I assure you, no digital photograph can do what this real work of art does. But here is the figure of perhaps God, and then you have a scale. And on one side are these tiny human figures. And on the other side, you have a beaker, a microscope, and a quill. And so Mary Ellen McDermott's work is called Man is the Measure of All Things. And the work was created in the same year that the Structure of DNA was published. And so and it also happened to be the year that IBM started as a company. And so she was seeing all these things that were happening in the world, we think. She's never written about what she was thinking of. And I will say, of all the works in the show that is happening right now, and there's a couple of works we'll see that are by very well-known artists, almost everybody has stopped me to ask me about this work of art. And I wished I knew what she was actually thinking. But we believe that she must have really been thinking about all these kinds of human endeavors, that, you know, these sort of these benchmarks and all these things that were changing in society, and how much of that was fueled by human innovation. What's nice about this painting, and why it's actually really important that we take better digital photographs, is that it has a really interesting surface. It is very matte. It has a lot of, almost like, it looks like She painted it and then scraped it down. And that's why, I mean, I was in the galleries on Friday. We've been doing photography. You might see me or our photographer in there. We're working like it's actually just a place where we're doing our jobs, and you'll see us periodically going in and doing documentation. You know, we do visual descriptions, for example, for the blind. You'll see us in there doing this kind of stuff. So you can see behind the scenes. And so when I'm in there, I often hear people go, oh! And then I turn around, I go around the corner to see what they're doing. And they say, wow, that looks amazing in real life. And that is why we have collections on view. Now, I will say the Marianne McDermott might be a local favorite, and it's a really amazing painting, but one of our most, probably something that was in storage that I was really stunned by, and I'm hoping this PowerPoint will let me advance. Let's see if it does. Yes, very slow. It goes backwards. There we go. I don't know what's going on. Give me 1 second. One of the works that I think is amazing, and it was stunning to me that was in storage when I got here, is this pair of works from Alvin Loving. He usually people most often call him Al Loving. Al Loving was an African-American artist who was born in Detroit, who made his career in New York in the 60s and 70s. We're seeing in art history generally that artists of color who maybe didn't get their due are gaining in importance, and Al Loving is certainly one of them, though he did really get his due in his time as well. So Al Loving is working in New York during the Civil Rights era, and many artists were doing images, even like Rauschenberg, they were doing things that were about social justice and about the America that we live in. And Al Loving was really interested in shape and color. And he did this project for his whole career. He is deceased. And both of these, if you notice, we just chose to put them on the same wall, which is something museums, we often don't get the opportunity to show the same artist over their sort of the way that they've changed their style. But he started with the one here, and then he went to this. And they're actually both about the same thing. They're about whether painting and art is flat or dimensional. And if you saw the one on the left in real life, it almost feels like it's dimensional, and then you get close up and it's really not. It's just completely flat, and it's all the artist's illusion. Then on the one on the right, if you look at it, you can see all of his stitch marks, because he first starts with the illusion of space, and then he moves into the creation of space. And they're both actually just painted canvases. And to have this in Akron, I mean, these are sort of extraordinary works of art. And that's something I would strongly commend you, to come down to the museum, because that's what is so extraordinary about this museum. There's no peer in the nation. I spend a lot of time trying to, figure out one problem, and then I call a friend at another institution. There's no peer. There's no other place in America where you have an institution with this scale of collection in a community of our size. You would see these kinds of works of art in a bigger city. Like Buffalo, for example, Albright Knox is basically a peer institution in terms of collection, but in terms of scale of city, we're much, much smaller. So you have this sort of resource right there, and most people can't walk into a gallery and see two Al Lovings sitting there. And these happen to me. I mean, two of my favorites anyway. Maybe I'm selling it because I love them, but when you look at them close up, the painting, we were looking on Friday at this one, and the facility of his brushstroke is, when you see the dimensions, because there's these little sort of stripes that are in the at the corners here, are just amazing. To think a human, just how carefully he did it with a tiny brush. Anybody who's ever used a brush for makeup, for example, will understand how amazing it is, how carefully he's done it. Another work that's very similarly so amazing that we have it in Akron is this work right here. It's by an artist whose name is John Clem Clark. He is a contemporary of Al Loving. He is not deceased, he's still with us, but they were roughly the same age. And John Clem Clark, and this is another thing that's so great about Akron, this artwork was purchased soon after it was made. So when they bought it in the late 60s, they didn't know that John Clem Clark would become a very famous 20th century artist. And he is. His name is not a household name, but his work is really well known, and you see it in collections. And this is said to be one of the best. Like if you read an article about John Clem Clark, they probably might photo reproduce this one. John Clem Clark has sort of an amazing process. What he does is he takes an artwork, and sometimes you see this now on Pinterest, but this was not something that was being done in fine art at the time. He'll take an artwork that he sees and he puts it in a transparency, and he puts it on an overhead projector. I was actually telling this story to a visitor in the galleries the other day, and I realized overhead projectors are perhaps generational. That I was like, those overhead projectors, and I had to look one up for them because they didn't know what I was talking about. So, but you can imagine a projector of some sort, however that works for your mental, frame. But he takes a work, and this is a work of art that there was a historic image of a state house, and this is a state house. And so he takes an artwork that somebody else has made, and he projects it. And the original work of art, I can show it to you on my phone. We have it on our website. You can see the original work of art that he borrowed. And he projects it, and he takes, for each color, he cuts a stencil. And so if you look at all the different colors here, each of those colors is a different stencil. And this work is enormous. It takes a whole wall of our gallery. And so he takes that stencil and he takes paint. And I looked for a picture of him in his process. To me, the spray bottle he uses looks like the one that I use to spray my cat when she does what she's not supposed to do. You can imagine it as you wish, but it's not a spray can like you bought from the store. It is instead, what he does is he takes acrylic and he waters it down and he sprays at the stencil. And so very slowly, layer after layer. And what is amazing about this is that when you come into the gallery, you'll have to see, and it's many works of art, this is true. But this one, certainly, it's lost digitally. It's hard to understand how amazing it is. But this work of art, he sprayed it and it's completely flat. You can certainly see the sprays. But it is largely sort of a flat surface, and that's because he has a real facility at spraying it. If anybody has ever if you've ever sprayed anything really in your life, you'll know that it drips, and you have to really have a facility for it, both understanding how viscous the liquid will be in the spray bottle and then doing it with real control. And it is truly an extraordinary work of art. And I've spent quite a lot of time with this particular work of art because I was trying to interpret it. And the other thing I really love about it is that it tells us a lot about composition. I think one of the questions people often ask us, and we've been taking turns standing in the galleries, asking people what they want to know. We also have right now, for the whole summer, we've put up a QR code so people would directly email us questions. And, a lot of times sort of many questions are, what am I looking at? Who's the artist? But then a common question in some ways is, why is it here? Why is this art? And one thing about this one I think is quite important is that he is an artist who is really thinking about process. Many of the artists of the American 60s made their name by trying something different, so breaking the rules. And he did that. But he also falls into line with a lot of sort of classical compositional categories. So if you see in this one, it's actually something that you see in like Instagram photographs very often. He uses the rule of thirds. So you have actually three major areas of space. You have this coffered ceiling here. So that's one area. You have the figures that are down here, and then you have a third area. So your eye has three different things to look at. And that's a very classic composition. He also does another thing, which is that he keeps bringing your eye through the composition. So if you look at something and you're like, why do I like it? It's oftentimes because there's a lot to look at. And even if you're not really following all of these little pieces and parts, because the way that we make meaning of visual stimuli is to try to put it all together. The other thing that he does, which I think is very interesting, is that he creates, and we had a long debate about it, and I've not been able to find a good printed resource to tell me what is actually true. But he creates, this is actually not the frame, this is painted. And it has, somebody said that it reminds them of old television, CRTs, those old television monitors that had kind of rounded rectangular spaces. But what he's actually doing is he is bringing your eye back to the composition. So, right now I have endless, boundless space. But then if I put this, then your eyes are immediately going to go to my face. And so he's done all of those things. If you're just walking by, you don't realize that those are all in your brain, but we've actually been sort of programmed to make meaning of those. So he doesn't have to tell you that, he's just doing it, which is why it's, I think, so masterful. Now, I know that I've been talking a lot and I wanted to show a couple more things, but are there questions up to now?
There's nothing in the chat box, but
Okay.
if anybody has questions, feel free to add them to the chat.
Absolutely, absolutely. And here I wanted to show you all, I know it's on my phone, but there you go. This is what the original composition looked like that he was inspired by. You can see it's brightly colored, it's much yellower, much brighter. What I love about the way he did it is, actually, I think that the figures come out more in his color palette. Here, you spend much more time looking at the ceiling in the one over here. So for the last bit, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what you're going to see in the second rotation, and I'm going to read you the dates so that you know. Let's see here. The second rotation for this outside of storage, we call it Reconsidered, works from our collection, will be June 19th to September 22nd. And I thought I could show you a little bit about it, but I also wanted to tell you a little bit about how shows come together. So when you come, you will not see this work of art or this work of art, but you will see this work of art. And what happens is when we do exhibitions of any kind that we curate, what we do is we start by thinking about an idea. And so in this one, I actually, the one that you're going to see right now, my concept was how do artists use geometry in their compositions? And I explained it to you on that one, for example. And in the second rotation, I wanted to have the exuberance of humanity, which I sort of a lofty goal, right? And that's usually what people start with, sort of a lofty goal. So then I come up with the idea, and that would be exactly how I explained in the 80s show. And then what you do is you look at what you have available to you, and then you try to figure out, and this is a thing that I think anybody understands if you've ever been in a room and somebody has said to you, here is another thing to add to your wall or to your display or whatever. Museums do on some level. We certainly hang it really for the intellectual background, but we have to make sure they look good together. And so here you can see these three. This is an abstract work of art, but that actually does take from the movement of life. This is another abstract artwork by Pearson, and this is an artwork that's an abstracted human image by a person whose name is Frederick L. Hollandoner, who used to be the head of conservation at the Toledo Museum of Art. And I do think it's nice because they do sort of look good, and the last one is by Hal Lauderman, I should say. I do think visually on this slide, they look kind of okay, right? Like you can actually, the reason I chose them is because I realized that the forms here really replicate some of the forms here. And I thought, oh, these really do look good together there. And even our, conservation, our design departments, oh yeah, they look together there. Except for that, scale-wise, they don't work because this artwork is actually this big in comparison to these. And so what we ended up doing is having a completely different wall. The Hollandoner stayed and this one stayed, and you'll have to wait, you'll have to come back. These two got omitted. And you'll have to come to the galleries to see what came in the middle. I'm actually quite happy with what ended up in the middle there, but I'm not going to I'm going to make you come and see it. But I say it because I think it's a good way to think about how museums really balance these really intellectual pursuits. The other reason that I pulled a lot of the works together for the second installation is that the way that people show other people. So the way that Frederick Hollandoner, for example, or Hal Lauderman, who's the one on the right, shows a human really hits people very differently than something that's abstracted. And I think that's because, art is really made by humans for humans. And so when you see a human in it, you can't help but either empathize or tell a story. I have myself thought long and hard about this, this Fred Hollandoner. He went by Fred. work. I've thought long and hard about what was happening in the locker room. Is that guy in the back like staring at himself in the mirror? What's happening and why did somebody throw the, the towel up here? It's because I'm a human and I have been in a locker room and I have a lot of relevance. And I think for museums, oftentimes we forget that people bring what they bring. And when you create an installation that's all about people, you really are centering the visitor. You're saying to them, hey, add your stories, tell me what you want to see, create empathy with the works that are there. So some of the ones that will be in Reconsider 2 that you really need to come and see are, this is one of our greatest masterpieces. This is by a contemporary California artist named Larry Pittman. He was born in 1954 and he's very much still with us. And this is a fascinating work of art. It's made, you can see it here as one large thing. It will take the whole back wall of the main gallery. It's actually 5 panels. His process is layering of paint. And when you come to see it, you will see it's completely flat, but you will know, because I told you that, because you can't see it by the naked eye, that he worked on many, many layers of paint, slowly building them up so that you get, and creating a very polished surface. This work, he is, like a lot of artists, slippery about his meaning. So we can't exactly say what it means, but certainly he lived in Los Angeles during the AIDS crisis. He is a queer man. He spent some of his childhood in Colombia and was around faith a lot, Catholicism. And so some people see this as perhaps having some relationship to the way that, like, you can see these sort of symbols right here and a symbol right here, that it's the way that saints are classically depicted. So for example, the Mary Magdalene might have an ointment jar, for example, and you can see the jars here. Some people talk about how at the same time in the 80s and 90s in America, there was, the rise of like AZT and medicines to help people who are HIV positive. And so some people talk about like the beakers here as being that. A lot of people talk about his work as being related to marketing imagery. And so many people talk about how this almost looks like a billboard. And you can see, I think that's one that I really like. So somebody said to me, is it the same, one of my team, we were talking about this show, getting ready for visitors to come in, and they said, is it the real same person? And I do think that this figure perhaps looks different, but this figure and this figure could potentially be the same one. I actually, what I've read about him is that he used a lot of stock imagery. And it's, the 80s and 90s is really the time when there's a rise in the use of stock imagery, right? Because there's also a rise in digital, there's a rise in actually proliferation of media. And so you'll see that. But this work of art, I was just looking at it in storage on Friday. Truly, there is no digital representation that'll be as good as coming to see it, because the scale of it, I guess it was in the inaugural installation when you first walked into our main gallery, but it hasn't been on view in a really long time. And the scale of it is just extraordinary. And actually this color of his skin is like much pinker. It's much, much more interesting in real life. Another work of art that will be in that installation that I think is much more interesting in real life, there we go, these are some small images that you can see. This work right here is by a very well-known American California artist named Diebenkorn, Diebenkorn. And I remember when I walked into storage when I first got here in the middle of 2019 that we had a Diebenkorn. The Toledo Museum of Art has a very large Diebenkorn, but Diebenkorn is one of those names that is sort of like the Warhols. He's a pretty big name. And what Diebenkorn does is, and I'll make this a little bigger so we can all see it, is that he has always been interested in how figures can be abstracted. So he does things like he'll do a landscape. He was in Berkeley, and he'll do a landscape, like the hills around San Francisco or things like that, Ocean Avenue or something. And but he makes it so it doesn't look like that. It just looks like what you're seeing back here, these sort of just elements of color. And I kind of think I was standing, I don't remember why I was standing near our oasis looking back at Akron through our Desuvero. And when you were standing, it was, I know why. It was the day that it was snowing. And I was sort of getting ready to take a picture for the social media team. And when you're looking at something and you look at it so long that it kind of becomes abstract to you, that's sort of what his process is. And so here, that this is a figure. I think we can all kind of guess that she's seated. But if you were to say, like, what does she actually look like? Other than to say she has short, she has a bob, it'd be pretty hard to say that. And that's kind of what his process is. And what happens when you do that, of course, is that then you just focus on the shapes. And so then you see that basically the shape of her dress is just a, sort of this kind of this form that, this is just sort of this triangular form, and it becomes just abstraction. Another artist that'll be in that installation that I want to bring up is Larry Rivers. He's roughly a contemporary of Diebenkorn. So this is also a 20th century artist. I'll make this one bigger. And this is another work that I promise you looks way more interesting in real life. Larry Rivers, while he's really well regarded, he didn't become famous. And actually, I said we've been inviting people to ask us questions. Somebody asked me about one of the artists in the show, why aren't they famous? And fame in the art world is a slippery thing, I think. And a lot of times the reason artists become famous is because, and Al Loving, I would say, is probably one of the people like that. They did the same thing, and probably John Clem Clark, that they do is something that people can identify. So then when you sell it, it's a blah. And, if you think about, let's say you like cars, you probably can identify cars, because of the shape of it or whatever it is that you like about cars. Obviously, I'm not a car person. I'm a shoe person, though, and I can tell you that I can identify shoes from 50 paces. And I think the art world is a little bit like that sometimes, that an artist who has an identifiable style often will gain a lot of fame because of it. Diebenkorn actually is one like that. Larry Rivers had his own style, and it kind of changed a little bit. It often felt like a little bit unfinished, like this one here. And it was never in keeping with what was fashionable in the art world. And so I think that's often why he's not a household name, whereas somebody like Diebenkorn, for a lot of museum people, would be a pretty household name. And this work of art, we were just talking about how are we going to show this on our social media, because it doesn't look like anything, but in real life, it looks sort of amazing. It almost looks like she's coming out of the fog. And it's so, and we were sort of trying to debate about how in the label we're going to write about these surfaces, because, it almost looks like an unfinished canvas. Now, we're not an institution that collects unfinished canvases necessarily. Some institutions do. In my previous job, we had some unfinished canvases, especially if you collect like 17th, 18th, 19th century art. So it's old enough that you still want it, even though it's not finished. But modern and contemporary museums usually don't do it. And we were saying, well, people think it's that way, and it's not unfinished. This was completely choice. He chose to do it this way. And so it's one that I would definitely come in to see. Now, I know my time is running out. I do want to try to, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to ask you if any questions, and then I want to also show you one thing on our website.
Seema, there was
Yes.
a question about
Great.
will the works in the museum collection remain in the possession forever, or
Yes.
do you trade with other institutions?
That's a great question. The thing about, so each institution has a very different policies on that. Our institution has the policy that we acquire to keep. So we don't, as a policy, trade, though, is a good question. The trading is actually something that happens very often. It's not quite a trade, it's usually called a loan. And my in-laws are in Cincinnati, and my nephew is going to basic training. So everybody's vaccinated, and we went to see him on Sunday to send him off. And somebody was telling me about having gone to Cincinnati Art Museum, and they saw this wonderful work of art. And I said, that's funny, that work of art is actually owned by the institution I work in. And so we often loan works of art, and that one was by an artist whose last name is Juvenek, who's probably one of the best known early 20th century Ohio artists, and he's from Cincinnati. He taught at the Art Museum in Cincinnati. So we had loaned our work there, and I knew it was there because obviously I had to sign off on being there. But so we often loan works of art, but our institution and you know, that's why actually our institution is very careful about gifts. We can't, if we don't think we can keep it, we can't take it. Because we cannot, we as an institution, our collecting policy is that we only collect modern and contemporary, 1850 on, largely American, and that they have to be able to stay in our collection. They don't have to go on view right away. Like, for example, we just got a really wonderful gift. Sadly, it was a bequest, sadly. But it was the son, his parents were friends with Kent State prof, whose name is Novotny. And it was a portrait of his mother and father. And so it is not going to be on view yet, but it will eventually be on view. And so it's in storage, but we only take things that we can keep. But that's a great question. And there's other institutions that have very different policies. And I think it's very case by case. For example, the Albright Knox in Buffalo it has the same kind of collecting policy now, 1850 on, largely American. We say largely because contemporary art is very global. And so that's why we say largely American. So we wouldn't probably acquire something from 1850 in Japan, but we would certainly probably acquire something that was made in Japan today, if it was something that's global. But the Albright Knox, for example, famously had this amazing Indian sculpture, and they deaccessioned it. And they sold it to the Cleveland Museum of Art, and it sits right in the front. If you walk into the Indian galleries, it's sitting looking back at you. And so that does happen, but we don't do that. Now I want to show you one last thing, because and hopefully I will share my screen one last time, because share screen, there we go. I do want to say, please, please, please come back and visit us for real. This is a very, quick look at so many things that are happening. We have a lot of installations I just told you about. So basically there will be, 2 different installations in our main gallery, and you need to see both of them. But we're also doing something we've never done before. We're doing a huge garden installation. We are wrapping the wall of the building. I even talked to the artist and the installer this morning, and it still seems amazing. But we are putting this artwork on the wall, the side wall of the building. And so when you come to see Downtown at Dusk, generously sponsored by the Summit, you can see this installation. It'll be the backdrop. It's going to be on the feature wall. And so it'll almost turn the whole garden into a gallery. And it's nice because we chose this installation because we really didn't know. We planned this last 2020, fall of 2020, what the world would be like. But it's completely socially distanced. There's a little packet that helps you, learn a little bit about the installation. There's 2 hidden sculptures in the garden. I'm not going to tell you where they are. You have to come and see them. And then the feature wall this is part of what you'll see on the feature wall. And then the side of the building will be wrapped. And this artist is an up and coming artist who lives in Cleveland. He's actually from Pittsburgh. And he has an installation that you might have seen. It's in Public Square in Cleveland. So he has another installation. The one that I saw was the reason that when I reached out to him, he had done an installation in Cleveland's Chinatown, which is right next to where I used to work. And he wrapped all of the circuit boxes in there. And so we already have, I think it's going to be in Cleveland Magazine, Ohio Magazine. People are very excited about it. And I really encourage you all to come and see it, because it's just really fun. I've been seeing the comps. He calls me every day. He's still actually not completely finished with the artwork, apparently. So he calls me pretty much every other day to tell me how he's going, but it's going to be a wonderful installation. And we chose it also, not just that it's accessible in terms of COVID, but it's really accessible, I think, to a wide range of audiences. He himself is Chinese American, but he was very inspired by anime, which is, all ages. And I think it's a great show to bring, you mentioned all your grandchildren and great grandchildren. It's also dog friendly, you can bring your dog, but it's a nice thing for this first summer after COVID for everyone to see it. And it's such a positive thing. It has all these great words like, do it, win, you know, like just really happy, positive things. And we wanted that for our community this summer. So with that, I know I'm really out of time, but are there any last questions? I know I had so much to try to catch.
There were lots of comments.
Yeah, lots of
People-
comments, but no more questions.
Oh, good.
But
I
thank
will
you
say
so
that I'm really accessible. You can find me online. Right now, if you go to our Reconsidered page, it sends you, there's like a message box. If you have questions about the work of art, it actually comes to my email address because I have curated Reconsidered. And I'm very, very happy. Hopefully I'll see you in person at downtown at dusk. If you feel unable to come in person for whatever reason, we're also live streaming it to keep it as accessible as possible. And then you can also see the Jordan Wong installation, either virtually, really.
Well, Seema, thank you so much. Your passion is obvious. You make me excited. I'm going to make a
Good.
date
Good.
to come downtown at dusk and go from there. What we usually do, I'll wrap up the meeting now for those who have their hard stops at 1. One of the challenges with virtual life is people just drop a meeting on your schedule, and you know, many of us have to do that. But if you have the flexibility to hang out for another 10 minutes or so, we do leave it open for people to have some private chat. The other announcements, there are no birth dates this week, but joint anniversaries. Mario Macau has been with us for 3 years. Renick Andrioli has been with us for 10 years. When Seema talked to us about the fact that, you know, they're looking at that hybrid opportunities to live stream some of these experiences if people aren't vaccinated or aren't quite ready to go out and mix. Similarly, we are actually starting to consider what life might look like in Rotary moving into next year. So be on the lookout. We're going to be drafting a survey that not only says, what do you like in terms of how would you like to be engaged always, but also how would you like to be engaged at this point in time? What are things that would work for you? What wouldn't? I suspect that we will have some virtual components moving forward. It'll be another silver lining of COVID. So please be on the lookout. I'm hoping the week after I get back from my daughter's wedding, I will have that ready to roll. I'm meeting with Steve Bowie this afternoon. So thank you, Seema. And I am going to close meeting. Have a great week, everyone. And those of you who can remain, hang in there.
Is Susan Colville Hall still on the call?
She is.
Oh, who is your sister?
Or is that Jenny? Are you seeing Jenny?
No, it's in the comments. It says, my
Oh,
sister is a
oh.
docent there. I'd love to say, I don't know who she is. I'm glad I know her.
Susan, are you, can you unmute?
I have to unmute.
Sounds
Okay.
You're
good.
there.
Yes, my sister is a docent.
Yeah,
In
what's her
fact,
name?
she painted the one of the pictures that's right behind me.
Oh,
The
wonderful.
blue
What?
heron,
Yeah, that's wonderful. What's your sister's name?
Mary Jo Worthington.
Oh, sure. I know her. I know her. I'm giving a talk for the docents about Reconsidered too in like this week or something. So maybe I'll see her virtually.
Okay, yeah, well,
I'll tell her that our paths crossed.
okay, very good. Thank you so much. I enjoyed
Thank
it
you.
very much.
Thank
and
you. Oh, I'm
excited
glad.
to get to see some of the many collections there.
I know. It is.
So the-
It's been really nice just to see these things that some of the works hadn't ever been on view, and then some had been on view many, many years ago.
So the current show ends when?
Uh-huh. This current show ends June 6th,
Okay. So
and then
we've
we
got
have a
month.
very quick turnaround, and then the next show opens June 19th.
Okay,
Yeah, so it'll be, it's because there's so much in storage. You know, we have 7,000 works of art, and we only ever can show less than the 1% of our collection with the gallery space that we have. So it's been nice to be able to share them. But we're also we're starting a huge initiative to digitally photograph our full collection in high resolution. We're joining Google Arts and Culture. And so we will have lots of our collection growing on our website. You'll see much, much more.
very good. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you. Did anybody have any other questions?
I had a question. I don't want to dominate though, if there's other folks. So my question is, you clearly know art, you know art history, you know the techniques and the color balance and how you make a display and how you put a whole show together. What's involved in getting to be a CXO?
Oh yeah. So I think so there's a number of us now. I was probably the third in the field, behind two actually friends of mine. Most people who come into CXO actually, and I will say I'm the same, they don't come from curatorial work, they come from visitor experience or digital work. So the largest part of my career has been I've worked on exhibitions my whole career, but I have always been on the side that helps interpret it for visitors and putting it on the website or putting it through any kind of social media. So a lot of what people, their background usually comes into being digital and visitor experience. And that's what my background is as well. I started out as a gallery guide at the Toledo Museum of Art when I was in graduate school, but at the same time, I built our first teacher website for the Toledo Museum of Art. And so that's where I came from. And I think most people who are in experienced positions like me are able to, and they have them both in art museums and in science museums, that they are able to help people understand collections. I think a thing that museums are really struggling with is that, for a lot of people, the world is pretty fast now. There's a lot of choices for what you could do with your life and your leisure time. And so you need to really make it a place that people want to be, and so I think probably it's not a surprise that it's an institution that I'm the inaugural chief experience officer of the museum, decided we would have a garden installation, for example, because a garden, what we had was a problem. We really truly didn't know if we'd be able to have installations inside our building last year. And we had to figure out a solution. And my job was to try to find the solution. And in that case, it happened to be the garden. But yeah, that's sort of how most of them come to it. The woman who's the first chief experience officer of American Art Museum is at the Cooper Hewitt in New York City, which is our national design museum. It's actually a Smithsonian. It's one of the Smithsonians, but it's in New York City. And she has a wonderful career. She was an academic in technology, and then she started working at the Imperial War Museum. She actually made the very first technology space in museums. It was in the Imperial War Museum in London. And her problem was that people were forgetting the war. They just didn't understand how the war came to pass. And you were in London, which was, so it was so important, but, young people really didn't get it. And so she created this really interesting digital installation that helped people understand how the war came to pass, how it affected and how it changed British society. And so that's where she came to. The second one was the chief experience officer of the Rubin Museum, which is in New York City, and that's a museum of Himalayan art. And she came from, she was an education staff member. She was also a gallery. She started out as a gallery teacher at the Portland Art Museum. So yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's nice because what it means is that museums are trying to do a better job. And I think in some ways, like, I come from, from a family of people who were in medicine. And I think that hospitals in some ways are doing that too. You mentioned about children's. We're realizing the world has changed and we have to change too. And that's really what experience officers usually are doing. They're about trying to find ways that you can transform the experience for visitors so that they really get it. Are there any other questions? I have a question. John R. Daly, can you tell me about your display? You have an amazing display behind you. You're smiling. Would you unmute?
Can you unmute it? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, they're world or national masters swimming championships. There's one world masters medal. It's out of the picture. Was held in Montreal, Canada. I got 5 medals in that meet.
Oh.
I don't even remember which events I swam. I'd have to look it up.
Well, I've never gotten a medal in anything. When you first signed in, I thought, wow.
John
That's
still
amazing.
swims. You
Oh,
still
really?
swim competitively.
What's that?
You still swim competitively, right?
Well, recently the meets have all been
Yeah.
canceled. I think the last one I swam in was a year ago, last January.
That's wonderful. I've certainly never swam in a meet.
Been canceled since then. So I still swim
Mm.
3 days a week.
Oh, wonderful.
Not very fast or very far anymore, but at least in the water.
I bet you could still beat me. It's an amazing display. It's clearly, I saw it and I thought, wow, he's accomplished, quite accomplished. So, yeah, bravo. Well, are there any other questions? Well, I hope that all of you reach out. I'm really impressed by your camp. Cheryl was mentioning it earlier, and I hope there's times that we can overlap or partner because, I did say, for example, our Jordan Wong installation, we purposely put it outside in a very ADA accessible place, and it's a place that it's basically low sensory because it's outside. So hopefully we'll be able to, find a way to connect because I do
I think
very much
that's a
believe in Rotary.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for us to connect and bring our kids from camp.
Yeah. I would
And
love to
get you,
host.
and we'll get you to camp. So any
That's right.
Tuesday at noon, when you find yourself unexplained with some space in your calendar, feel free to zoom in with us.
Well, thank you very much.
It's stand.
Well, thank you
belongs
very
today.
much. Hopefully we'll overlap more. Have a good day.